All right, for our third session on the consumer track this morning, we have Meir from Descope. He's going to talk a little bit about tailoring passkey journeys for different users. We'll do Q&A at the mic at the end, and you can also submit them through the app. So Meir, take it away.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining our talk. I'm going to talk today on deployment case studies around passkeys, specifically going to focus on the user journeys, different user journeys on those use cases. A bit about me. I'm Meir. I'm a co-founder at Descope. We are basically doing CIAM, Customer Identity Access Management. My background is a lot around the low and no-code platforms for like over 13 years. Been doing that in several spaces in cyber and IT and DevOps. And my previous role was Senior Director of Engineering at the MISTO, which was acquired by Palo Alto Networks, so I did both roles there. Jumping into our agenda, basically, we're going to go case study by case study of different customers of ours that deploy passkeys and the different challenges they had, basically, what they try to accomplish, and also how they needed to customize the different experience, the user experience for different end users inside their platforms. And we'll end up in some sort of a summary that's basically implementation do's and don'ts, which is, we will see it's basically a summary of the above. Continuing a bit. So first case study, I'm going to say in advance that this is a branch insurance, which will later have their own session around their implementation of passkeys. So I'm trying not to spoil too much of what we're going to show, but I am going to talk a bit about their implementation. So stay tuned for in this room. After the break, they will have also a session, very interesting. I'll definitely recommend it. Branch insurance, they're doing insurance tech for multiple end users, the supporting, covering 100 million Americans in their customer base. And why they needed passkeys, basically, it was for, first of all, the regulatory requirements, to doing for two-factor as part of the insurance, they are in the insurance space, and eliminating shared accounts, and protecting, of course, from account takeover cases. So, a bit about, just to give a notch on our platform, basically we are a low-code platform around authentication. So you can see there is like a workflow that is basically the authentication flow. And you can customize it. I'm sure this is the part of that authentication flow for branch insurance. And I want to highlight a few things. It might be a bit hard to see from the distance for the audience, but you'll see that there is on the yellow steps, there is like a segment steps. What are those? Basically, those are steps that actually do tracking of different steps inside the flow, inside the authentication flow. You will also see here they're doing several authentication. It's a bit blurred, so I'll try to read out, but you'll see there is like OTP with email, some sort of fallback also for the passkeys. There is also passkeys authentication. There is some complexity to the flow because of the different user experience. And let's try to drill down into one of those. Well, first of all, there is need some sort of handling if the device even supports passkey. One of their challenges was more like a concern was that their customer base, there might be a lot of end users that don't have devices that support passkeys at all. Very old devices, very old browsers. That was their concern. So what they actually did, they did a condition that actually checks if the device even supports, so they can both track it analytically wise, but also have a fallback in case something they don't, of course, have support. So a fallback to the passkey to something else. In this case, it's OTP with email. So they basically added a condition. They were surprised to find out that basically the vast majority of 151K end users at a certain point of time did have passkey support devices, and only 6 didn't have. So They took the safe approach, but in the end, it was like a non-issue. And it's important as part of a Passkey implementation to also be prepared to the future to see what things can go wrong, track them, and also be prepared to fall back in case they went wrong. So in the end, that was a no-brainer. And the next part, let's see here, is error handling. I a bit touched on it in the previous slide, but it's very important to, of course, handle errors. Sometimes the flow of the authentication and the passkey specifically might fail. Something browser or a certain device, a certain browser, a certain user action that you didn't anticipate. And you need to take into account those user errors. And the first thing to do is, of course, as I mentioned before, track. You need to track those user errors to actually have analytics on top of that to know what went wrong, and then you can iterate on that in the future to fix that. So you'll see that they are also tracking all the different user errors and sending them to the segment. In this case, there's a CDP platform. And to have the analytics to be able to, in the next iteration, to overcome those errors to have better experience and change the user experience flow. The second one is, so as I mentioned, segment. You'll see there's like different steps for different error types. Some of them will have actual fallbacks. So if something really went wrong, fall back to a different authentication method in some cases. But sometimes fall back to just trying again. That's also an option. In this case, I mentioned OTP as email for the fallback. Their deployment was a very great success. They'll share more about that in the next session, which I, again, recommend strongly. 25% of Passkey adoption, where they was higher than the initial goal of 20% they had for the as a KPI for the implementation. Login failures, around 5%, and 50% drop-off in password-related support tickets, which was also something important for them, lowering the amount of burden on the support teams. Moving on to the next case study. This one is Databricks. I'm a bit low on the amount of data here, but Databricks is a company I'm guessing most people in the audience are already familiar with. Big company, thousands of employees. Their Passkey project was around the second factor, and they wanted to do something that they believe will have a mostly better experience than TOTP, which requires them to install a new app. So this is one of the reasons they wanted to try and experiment with passkeys. They did feel there was a good user experience in Passkey over TOTP. And they really liked the autofill, basically, experience. So I'm guessing you're familiar, but the autofill, once you're actually on the bullet of the email, usually the field of the email, it automatically suggests to you to use an existing passkey that you already have. They like that experience, and they want to try it out. The final number that you see here at a certain point of time, they have an adoption rate of 6% of the user base. That doesn't sound like a lot, but for them it was considered as a successful project for the second factor, and they were happy on that perspective. Going on to the next case study, this is a much smaller company, Prompt Security. They're a cyber startup doing Gen AI B2B cybersecurity. And they have a lot of types of end users. You'll see that it's both for employees and developers, homegrown apps, and even red teams. So there is different types of personas logging into their system. As part of that, they have something which is a bit unorthodox, which is that you can see here in the login part of the login page, they have a lot of authentication methods, like a lot. You'll see you can sign in with a lot of OIDC providers like Google and Microsoft, log in with Google, Microsoft, GitHub, GitLab, Slack, but they also support Magic Link. They also support the user password if you want, and they also support Passkey. So a lot of options. That's something we usually don't see a lot, but that's the way they wanted. The reasoning for that is we have a lot of different types of personas. This relates to the previous part. And since there's a lot of personas, they want to give the easiest and most convenient option for each persona to log in however they want, and less enforcements on what's the type of initial first factor they use for login. That was their consideration. They did promote passkeys as part of the journey. You can see on the button like an option to add passkeys as part of your user journey as the login. So for them, passkeys was yet another option. There was not like a big important reason why to do to add passkey specifically. They just wanted to do another option to support those customers like they have for all the others. But the outcome was good. They said that basically one of their big customers got on board on the platform, so there is a passkey option, and really it resonated very well for them. It showed them for like maturity of the startup, maturity of their security posture. They liked it a lot, and left very good impression on that big customer over there, so they were happy with the implementation. They did it really quickly. Wasn't like a big project for them. Some things to do consider in that user experience condition. They're B2B. A lot of times there's multiple customers, especially the bigger customers are using SSO login. Also that, of course, they support. Which in SSO, I mean basically their customers bring in their own IDP for doing a login with SAML or IDC. In this case, in SAML, I think they only support in this case. And for them, of course, if a customer already brings his own IDP, usually you don't want to promote him to do a passkey login as first factor, because anyway, it's delegated to the federated login, to their SSO, so there's no really lot of motivation to promote passkey in that case. So you'll see there is a condition that basically, it's a bit blurred, but I can highlight it to tell you that basically it checks, of course, if the user doesn't have a device supported, the WebAuthn don't show that promotion of the passkeys, and but also if the user already enabled SSO login for his company, then basically skip the promotion of passkeys. There's no need for that. So this is something that can happen a lot in the B2B use cases that we see. And they also use the autofill experience, basically, on their login page. So if I go back, actually, you might not see it. There is no bullet for like login with a passkey, but there is autofill on the email address. Once you click on it, it basically pops up and suggests you to log in. So you'll see that a lot of customers, we happen to have used the autofill experience. Okay. So they basically promote it. Fourth case study, that is basically us, Descope, our console, our platform login. So our motivation to add passkey. First of all, we need to, a word about us, we support both B2B and B2C use cases. So that requires us to handle different types of also developers that will need to log into the platform. And we need to balance between different types of customers, like between enterprise customers, like you saw a few of them in the past, like I mentioned Databricks, which require very secure login for them going into our platform. And on the other hand, there is sometimes startups which are just starting, or even small B2C startups, customers, which will favor quick onboarding and don't want the hassle of even though they don't want like second factor sometimes, or they're good with their first factor passwordless authentication. So we need to balance between the security aspects of the bigger enterprises versus the smaller customers, which will prefer a frictionless experience. So we chose to add the passkeys to our platform because to give for the high security, the highest standard that we believe in most of the authentication methods. On the other hand, also promote awareness. We are big believers in passkey, and we believe it is more secure definitely than things like passwords. And and also the other authentication methods, and we wanted to promote that as part of our user journey in our platform. So that was the reason why we added passkeys. Our first iteration, as you can see, was based on that the user can go to his basically user profile and then add passkeys from there. So this is not really enforcing a lot of customers, unlike promoting it as part of the login to add passkeys. And that's what happens with that use cases. Usually it results with low conversion because we're not really pushing customers to do the passkey. We're giving them the option, but if he doesn't, without the proper awareness, chances he'll touch and add that are slim. So that was the first iteration. We are moving to a next iteration where basically we're moving for more a classic, more aligned to the guidelines of FIDO around the user experience of passkey and doing it as part of your login, promoting it as part of your onboarding or the login to drive more awareness. So this is something we're planning for later, but take into account. The fifth case study is actually a bit of a negative case study, you can say. So a bit about that customer. That customer is a global travel tech company. It's a big company. It serves like 40 markets worldwide, lots of employees. And they had suffered from account takeover cases where basically was like phishing websites. They tried to emulate the same login. Since they're a travel tech, there's also transactions involved. So it was significant for them. And they wanted to solve that problem and to lower the amount of issues they see around that and to move to something which is not phishable. So sounds like a classic use case for passkeys, at least for us. And we did recommend them, okay, let's do passkeys for the second factor. Their second factor used to be OTP using a phone, which you can do that phishable, and first factor user password. So we recommended passkeys, and there were concerns in that, especially around the user experience. The customer had significant concerns that his customer base, his end users, are basically not ready for that change, and that will burden too much the support tickets. The change will be too heavy. They will not know how to handle passkeys, and will create some problems of churn and misunderstanding, and people not able to log in. So severe concerns about the user experience. While they did acknowledge that it is a classic solution for the problem, as it's more secure and unphishable, bounded to a domain passkey, basically, it is the right solution. They prefer to go to a different route. And basically, in the end, they chose to solve it by doing a magic link. Basically, magic link as the second factor on the same device. That obviously solve their problem. It gives you the ability to basically you're not able to phish the email itself unless you have control of the email. So basically, that solved their problem. They did they are thinking about passkeys for coming years, for a next year project or something like that. They do believe in that, but they want to probably do that gradually and not something more drastic to solve that problem. So they do it with phases. But it's a bit of a negative example. So that's our case studies. To summarize a bit, some implementation do's and don'ts. It's very important to monitor the user journey. So I'll start with the positive. You'll see that the do and don'ts are a bit like mirrors. Monitoring that and tracking that user journey is critical. That's what gives you the ability to iterate over and over until you get the right user experience for your end users, making sure the conversion is optimal, and making sure you're not losing customers during the user journey for various reasons. It's also advised to try to run A/B testing, to run it on a subset of the customers. Don't roll out everything at once to all users. That is preferred. That gives you the ability to iterate, to also experiment with different user experience flows, and that way to get to the right optimal flow for Passkey without creating too much friction and impacting your support tickets and things like that, doing that journey. Have a fallback. Usually it's a fallback for errors, anything don't work out, so customers can continue even if things are problematic for them. So this is definitely something to consider and think about it when deploying Passkey. And I'm sure the last part is a bit derived from the above. It's important to have all the teams related, especially the support teams, as part of the process to make sure that they will see changes, because even if you change the authentication method, people are impacted and they sometimes find issues with the new authentication method and the new journey they see, and they'll need support. So it's very important to align all teams, both the development and the support, around the changes to handle that and be prepared basically to the changes. And don't stop iterating, basically just keep improving over time the user journeys. I'll leave a bit minutes for questions.
Yeah, about 4 minutes for questions. Just come up to this mic right here. We'll start with one from online. Isn't TOTP not secure if the server gets hacked?
Again, no, TOTP not secure.
Isn't TOTP not secure if the server gets hacked?
If the server gets attacked? Hacked. The server. I'm not 100% understand the question. Which server does it?
I think the service. If the service gets hacked, the service you're logging into, if they get hacked, isn't TOTP not secure in that case for use?
The service, the authentication service.
Yeah, I'm just guessing based on what's written here.
I'm also like trying, when it's online, it's a bit trickier. So first of all, like in this example, they didn't use the TOTP in the end. That they preferred something which is not TOTP, but more for experience use case. In general, TOTP. Yeah, it's a bit less related to the session. We might need more context.
Any questions in the room? Going once? Oh, okay, thank you.
So much for the talk. I was wondering, you mentioned MFA and using passkeys as MFA. Is that from a regulatory perspective where they could use passkeys as MFA, and in that particular scenario, was there any limitation on it being device-bound versus synced?
As far as I know, there wasn't any limitation on the device-bound. You mean for the first case study I showed, for the second factor, or the second one?
I forget, but for one of them, you mentioned that it was to get MFA.
Yes. So the first one was driven by regulation. And this is actually branch insurance. They are actually giving the talk, the next talk on this room, so definitely they can elaborate on that. But as far as I remember, it is there was no problem for the second factor to be device bound, but they did prefer device bound because they wanted to have it in the same prevent from account sharing. So that was a plus for them that it's the device bound basically.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions in the room? All right, well, thank you, Meir. And there's a quick break after this, before the next session.